Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Lord of the Rings AMA podcast. My name is Matthias Austin, and I'm here to answer any questions you have about the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit, the Silmarillion, basically anything from the world of Tolkien. Now, a little bit of background about myself. I am not a Tolkien scholar. There are many of those out there in this world. I am merely a Tolkien fan. And in my fandom, I have acquired a lot of information about Tolkien, about his world, about his works, and I will often have people ask me questions because they know, oh, you're a Tolkien guy, you know Lord of the Rings. Why did X, Y, and Z happen? And I'll start to go into my answer, and I'll see their eyes glaze over because I have a lot of things to say, and they're usually not ready for that detailed of an answer. So I wanted to find a place where I could put all of this knowledge to use that I have accumulated. And so, the whole point of this show is you send in questions. I'll do my best to answer them as fully and in-depth as possible. Now, a little bit of background for my quote-unquote credentials, I guess, where I came from, how I started falling in love with this world. The first introduction I had to the world of Lord of the Rings was actually in the at the release of Fellowship of the Rings in 2001. Never read any of the books. I hadn't even read The Hobbit. I knew largely little about this. I was a fan of fantasy, but I hadn't read those texts. And I went to see, on a Christmas break, went to go see Lord of the Rings in theaters, The Fellowship of the Ring, and I was blown away. Just absolutely blown away by everything I saw. It was one of the greatest movie-going experiences of my life. And so I went home from the theater, and I used at that time it was Borders, rest in peace Borders, my Borders gift cards that I had gotten for Christmas to purchase The Hobbit, and then the combined edition of all three, Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, and Return of the King. Over that Christmas break, I read the whole thing. Cover to cover. I woke up in the morning, I started reading, I took a break to go eat food, and that was pretty much my day for the entire week. And at the end of it, I had read everything, and I had just fully fallen in love with this world. So, yeah, that's how I got invested in it. It's just been growing ever since. A little bit later, I tried the Silmarillion, fell in love with that even more. That's probably my favorite one of the, I guess you would call them canonical Tolkien works, though there's much debate about whether you can even call the Silmarillion canonical, because Tolkien, J.R.R., did not finish it during his lifetime. His son Christopher Tolkien put it together and did nerds everywhere a great service by putting together the wider legendarium, as it's referred to. So, yeah, that is my sort of background with Tolkien and his works. Just basically got hooked in middle school, and I've not let go since. I will say, like I said, I'm not a scholar. I'm a fan, and I'm going to do my research, but I might get it wrong. If I do, I welcome you to challenge me on that, and there's going to be times where I just put out my opinion. That's great. Like, if you disagree with my opinion, let me know. We do have an email address, LOTRAMAPod, so Lord of the Rings AMA Pod, LOTRAMA Pod at gmail.com, and you can submit any questions you may have there, or any discussions, or if you disagree. Maybe I'll put together some social media if people start listening to this. Who knows? Otherwise, this will just be for me out in the void. But I do want to get started with our very first question. This question actually comes from my good friend Peter. He almost was a co-host on this podcast with me, where he was going to ask me the questions and we'd have a little bit of a back and forth, a dialogue, but he lives far away and got married and has kids, and just kind of the timing didn't really work out. So there's an unreleased version of this podcast that is the two of us talking. I had COVID. It was rough. That exists somewhere on an electronic file that, if it still exists, will never see the light of day. But I'm fully ripping off that first episode for this first episode, and thank you, Peter, for that. So, Peter asks, it's a multi-part question. Why does Gandalf stay and fight the Balrog? Why didn't they just run away? Does Gandalf know he's going to transform into Gandalf the White? Is he doing a Messiah thing? Thank you, Peter, for your question. Now, I'm going to give you the quick answer to all of that, and then I'm going to give you the detailed answer. So the quick answer is, why does Gandalf stay and fight the Balrog? Why didn't they just run? Well, the answer is the Balrog would follow them. I know it's like a narrow bridge, right? But actually, the Balrog could get out. It would be able to leave, and it would easily have overtaken them. The Balrog is smart. It's not a mindless beast, so it would follow them. As for, does Gandalf know he's going to transform into Gandalf the White? Is he doing the Messiah thing? The answer is no, but he did probably think he was going to die, and we will get into all of that. So, to start to answer this question, we got to go back to some basics here. So, what are Balrogs? So I'm going to give you a really quick rundown of the basic creation myth of the Lord of the Rings Legendarium. There is one god, Eru Ilúvatar, the father of everyone. He is like God in the sort of monotheistic Judeo-Christian sense, right? Tolkien was a devout Catholic. Of course, it would make sense to him that there would be one single creator of the universe, even in a fictional universe. And so that is Eru Ilúvatar. Underneath Eru, in terms of the order of the heavenly ranks, are the Ainur. The Ainur are basically like angels. They are kind of a mix between the biblical angels and then eventually the sort of Greek gods or the, sort of the pantheons that we have on Earth. So there's Eru above and then the Ainur, and the Ainur are split into two different groups. Eventually, a group of Ainur come. I hope somebody asks me a question about what is the background of how was the Middle Earth made, and because I'm just giving you a real quick rundown. Eventually, the Earth was made by the Ainur and Eru Ilúvatar, kind of. It's complicated. Ask me a question and I can get into it more. But in the world of Middle Earth, the Ainur come in and have a physical presence in the world. And they are split into two different groups, the Valar and the Maiar. And the Valar are like the most powerful of the Ainur. They are the ones who build everything and create things and kind of rule the earth as that Grecian pantheon. And beneath them, a lower order of the Ainur are the Maiar, which are like helpful spirits. They're just the same type of thing, but just less power, right? So, of the Valar, the two most powerful Valar is a guy named Melkor and a guy named Manwë. And by the way, my pronunciation's very Midwestern American. I'm doing my best. I'm probably going to get some things pronounced incorrectly. We'll get through it. So Melkor is like the biblical Lucifer. He's a fallen angel. He was granted all of this power to do the work of Ilúvatar, Eru, in this world, but he wanted the power for himself. And so he, instead of helping create this world and nourishing this world, sought to control and destroy this world. He is essentially a spirit of fire, is often how he would get described. They're the four most powerful of the Valar. Powerful, arguable. But you have Melkor, who's essentially a spirit of fire. Manwë, who is like wind or air. Aule, who is earth. And Ulmo, who is water. And that's sort of the medieval sort of hierarchy of the world. You had, I have some of this wrong, this order might be wrong, but I believe it goes like earth, water, air, fire, right? That's sort of, there's ground, there's water above the ground, there's air above the water, there's fire in the sky and the stars above the air. And that's sort of like the hierarchy. And throughout Tolkien's writings, Melkor has these different, he's related to fire in a lot of different ways. And one of the ways he is related to fire, and by the way, Melkor eventually becomes a guy called Morgoth. complicated, we can get into it. Ask me another. Hit me up on the podcast or in the email and let me know if you've got questions about any of this. I'm going through it pretty quick. Melkor / Morgoth, he is a Valar who falls into evil. And with him, he brings along different Maiar. Maiar being that lesser order of angelic beings, right? And there are a few different types, but the main things that you would hear about are Sauron is one of those. He is a Maiar, but he is not a Maiar of the Order of Melkor, one of the fire guys. He's actually of Aule, the earth guy. And then the Balrogs are the Maiar that are of that same order as Melkor. They're the fire guys, and they're basically like fire demon spirits. But they're like cousins almost to Sauron. And it is very interesting the way he did this because, fire doesn't build, it destroys. Whereas earth and Aule is the guy who made the dwarves, and they like to craft and mine. And so a guy who worked for the guy who likes to make stuff is Sauron. And so the big difference between the Balrogs and Sauron, they're both of the same kind of angelic order. Sauron wanted to control things. He wanted to make things. And we see that, right? He makes the rings of power. He controls the different armies. Balrogs are spirits of fire. They are fire demons, and fire just wants to destroy. That's what they do. They like to destroy. They're also intelligent. I know in the Peter Jackson film, it kind of just shows a massive, almost like Godzilla-type monster kaiju, just screaming and belching out flames, and it doesn't speak. But they can speak. They have a language. They are intelligent. And in fact, in the first age of Middle-earth, and everything in Lord of the Rings happens in the third age, but in the first age of Middle-earth, the Balrogs were in the army of Melkor, and they had commanders, and they wielded weapons. They had axes and swords and whips, right? And so why didn't they just run away? Because the Balrogs were going to follow them. Balrogs are smart. They're intelligent. They have this innate urge to destroy. And a Balrog would recognize Gandalf as a Maia because Gandalf himself is of that same. He is a Maia, part of the Maiar. He came into Middle-earth and kind of lowered himself from his angelic status to having a physical, mortal body in the sense that it could be destroyed. So the Balrog would recognize Gandalf as a Maia and want to destroy him because they're enemies. Now, who's Gandalf? Why is he there? Right? So Gandalf's original name was Olorin, and he was sent by Manwë, who we talked about earlier. He's the Valar in charge of the winds and the clouds, right? He's kind of the boss of the Valar, most opposed to the works of Morgoth. And Olorin, Gandalf, was sent by Manwë with the other wizards to aid the people of Middle-earth against the spirit of malice that was Sauron. They came in during the Second Age. Real quick rundown, a lot of diversions here. The First Age of Middle-earth ended when Morgoth was overthrown. Morgoth, Melkor, overthrown. He was enchained and cast out into the void. Sauron was his chief lieutenant, and he got out of there. He hid and then slowly built up his armies. The Valar directly intervened when Morgoth was in charge, destroying the world. But their intervention caused continents to sink beneath the ocean and just destruction because of how powerful they were. So they said, we're not going to intervene directly. Besides, Morgoth has been taken care of. But Sauron was still there. And so the peoples of Middle-earth, elves, human, dwarves, lesser extent dwarves, elves and humans, were constantly at war with Sauron and his creatures, the orcs, which were created by Morgoth. There's a whole episode we could have about what are orcs. So, yes, Gandalf was sent by Manwë to act as sort of a guide along with the other wizards. Saruman, Radagast, and then there's two others, the blue wizards. I don't have their names right in front of me. It's like Palando and something or other. Again, Fan, not expert. We can have a whole episode about the wizards. But they were sent to sort of guide the peoples of Middle-earth in their battle against Sauron. The 2 blue wizards went off to the east and got lost, or nobody really knows what happened to them. Radagast fell in love with being in the forests and the trees and amongst the animals, and he kind of stopped doing much. Saruman, we know what happened to him. He was corrupted by the power of the ring, by his desire for the ring, and he became sort of a servant who hated Sauron but worked for Sauron. So the only one who was still doing their job was Gandalf, or Aloran, right? So Gandalf's job is to stop Sauron. Destroying the ring is the only way to stop Sauron. We can have a whole other episode about what is the ring. But if you've seen the movies, if you read the books, you know, get rid of the ring, destroy it at Mount Doom, Sauron is defeated. So Gandalf's job, his whole job, is to stop Sauron. Therefore, keeping Frodo alive is the most important thing. So the Balrog is determined to fight. He's determined to chase them and kill them. Gandalf knows, I need to make sure the ring, the journey of the Fellowship, continues on. I'm the only one powerful enough here who even has a shot at fighting a Balrog. So that's why he stops. That's why he turns around and says, you guys go, I'm going to stay and fight this thing to buy you time, because that's his mission. His mission is to make sure Sauron is defeated. The only one who could do that is Frodo with the ring. So that's why he turned around to fight. Now, did he know that he was going to transform into Gandalf the White? No, he did not. I don't believe there's anything in any of the texts that say he knew that was going to happen. But he probably did think he was going to die, because in Tolkien's work, there are only 2 other instances of somebody having a one-on-one fight with a Balrog. And in both instances, those people died as well. They killed the Balrog, but they themselves died. Now, the first was during the fall of Gondolin. Ecthelion, the captain of the guard, or Lord of the Fountain, don't have it in front of me, but he had a one-on-one fight with Gothmog, the Lord of the Balrogs, the chief Balrog. This is alluded to in like 2 sentences in the Silmarillion, in the wonderful book, The Fall of Gondolin, that goes through sort of the different versions of the story that Tolkien played around with, but he never finished. In one of the earliest drafts, this fight between Ecthelion and Gothmog is in much more full detail, and it is awesome. It's so cool. Ecthelion has like a spiked helmet, and so when he's about to die, he leaps up and stabs his spiked helmet into the chest of the Balrog, who then grabs Ecthelion, but in the process falls back into a deep pool, and the waters of the pool and the weight of Ecthelion douses the flames of the Balrog and kills the Balrog, but in the process, Ecthelion dies. And that he was an elf. Ecthelion was an elf. He was a great, powerful warrior. He was an elf. The other one was Glorfindel. Glorfindel, also at the fall of Gondolin, was helping lead the escapees, the refugees from the fall of Gondolin, out through a secret mountain pass when a Balrog showed up. And there were a lot of people there, but Glorfindel was the guy who jumped up to fight him, to, again, buy people time to get out. Glorfindel also died in the process. Basically, he grabbed a hold of the Balrog and yeeted himself off of the mountain, and the 2 of them fell down and were both crushed by falling off of a mountain. Fun fact, Glorfindel shows up again in the book version of Lord of the Rings. In the movies, it's Arwen who saves Frodo and gets him on the horse and gets him to Rivendell in the Fellowship of the Ring. In the book, it is Glorfindel. And we can, again, real quick, and we can go into this in a later episode, elves don't die even when they die. If an elf dies, their spirit goes across the sea, or when the world was flat, they would go across the sea. Now that the world is round, they go across the straight way to the land of the Valinor, Aman, the Blessed Realm, and their spirit is kept in the halls of Mandos, basically like a purgatory, for a set amount of time, and then they are rebodied. They get their body back, and their spirit joins back to their body in the Blessed Realm of Aman, Valinor. Well, Glorfindel was so cool, when he was rehoused, the Valar were like, hey, they still need a lot more help over there. We're going to send you back across to help out Elrond in Rivendell in this fight against Sauron. That's how good of a warrior he was. But those are the only two instances we have of somebody having a one-on-one fight with a Balrog. And in those instances, both times, the Balrog died, but so did the person fighting. Now, Gandalf may have thought, well, I'm a Maiar. I'm of a higher order, higher power magnitude than an elf is. But First Age elves were something crazy in terms of what they could do. So he probably thought, odds are I'm not getting out of this, but I might be able to take this guy out with me. And he was probably thrilled when he cracked the bridge and the guy fell down. He was like, oh, sick, I did it. I didn't die. That's a little bit of a surprise. And then the whip comes and grabs him and drags him down, and he goes, this is probably, fly you fools, this is probably what was going to happen. So, he probably knew he was going to die. But did he know he was going to transform? No. So the question is, why did he transform from Gandalf the Grey to Gandalf the White? Now remember earlier I talked about Eru Ilúvatar, god of this universe who created everything and used the Ainur, the Valar, the Maiar to help in the creation of the world. Well, he kind of set things in motion and then lets the Valar run things. Very rarely, very, very rarely does Eru Ilúvatar directly intervene. So, what happens to Gandalf when he dies? Gandalf is not an elf. His spirit does not go across to Valinor. When Gandalf died, he didn't go back to Valinor. He went back to the Timeless Halls, which is, it's kind of like heaven. It's where Eru Ilúvatar lives. It's where the angelic beings were before the earth was created for them to come into the earth. He goes into the Timeless Halls. He says in there, in The Lord of the Rings, I strayed out of thought and time. Naked I was sent back. Manwë and the Valar are within time. They are in the world. They've been separated from the world, but like Aman, Valinor is still made of the same stuff that Middle-earth is made of. It's a physical place. It's a physical place that you can't get to anymore, but it's a physical place. So, Manwë and the Valar are within time. The only one with the power out of time that could possibly send back Gandalf, because he was out of time, remember, is Eru. And he only sent him back long enough to complete his mission. Because at the end of Lord of the Rings, Gandalf's like, all right, I'm taking some elves with me, and we're going to take Frodo and Bilbo, and we're headed back across to Valinor. So he was sent back for a very specific purpose. And it's only a handful of times that Eru will directly intervene. It happens when the dwarves are created, and we can have a whole episode about the dwarves. It happens during the story of Beren and Luthien, where he allows an elf to become mortal in sort of what's a foreshadowing of what happens to Arwen. It happens in the fall of Númenor, when basically the Atlantis of Middle-earth is drowned in the oceans. And that's it. And then he sends back Gandalf. And those are the only times that we know of where direct intervention from Eru Ilúvatar occurred. Everything else can look like happenstance. It can look like a coincidence. It can look like stuff that just happens in the world. But in those four instances, dwarves, Beren and Luthien, the fall of Númenor, and Gandalf being brought back as Gandalf the White are the only times that Eru intervenes directly into the workings of Middle-earth. Now, why does he do this? Now, I've got a personal theory about this. This is where I'm not a scholar. This is just me talking about my theory, my idea of why this happens. In the very beginning, the earth, the world, the universe, Middle-earth is created through the song of Ilúvatar. He gives this melody, and the Valar hear this melody, and they start to play the melody, and they play along with him, and then Melkor wants to do his own melody that goes counter to it, to Eru's melody, and so Eru takes Melkor's theme, and he weaves it into his own, and then there's more and more music, and then it gets more and more discordant as Melkor tries to take over, and at the end of the song, it ends with this horrible crashing chord, right? At the end of the song, Eru Ilúvatar reveals to the Valar, hey, what you just heard wasn't music. I mean, it was, but it was also the story of time. It was the music of Eru that told the story of everything that was going to happen in Middle-earth. And then he goes, and you guys are going to be the ones who are out there doing it. And this gets into a whole big discussion about, like, what is free will? How do you have free will when there is an omnipotent being, right? Can you have it? Well, in Tolkien's world, there is both free will. People are able to make their own choices. Specifically, humans are able to make their own choices. But also, the music of time has already been played. And so if you listen to the music, you know where it's all going to go. So my personal theory is that in the music of Eru, the White Wizard was going to help bring about the end of Sauron. Now, the White Wizard was Saruman, but Saruman failed. He turned his back on his mission. So if the White Wizard failed, but also the White Wizard was going to help bring about the defeat of Sauron, you have a paradox. If they can't both be true, unless Eru Ilúvatar directly intervenes and says, the music says a White Wizard is going to have Sauron defeated, help Sauron's defeat. I need a new White Wizard. And so that's when he plucks out Gandalf and puts him in again as the White Wizard. Now, what would happen if Saruman had not fallen? Well, a variety of things. They wouldn't have been in Moria in the first place. But let's say through some weird thing they had to go through Moria, and Saruman was still sticking true to his mission as Saruman the White, and Gandalf fought the Balrog, and both of them died. I don't believe Gandalf would have been brought back, because the White Wizard was still there, and could use his power to help defeat Sauron. But because the music called for the White Wizard, that meant that Gandalf got to come back. So to sum everything up, why didn't they just run away? The Balrog was going to follow him. They wanted to destroy good. They wanted to destroy the workings of good in this world. That's what they do. Gandalf was probably just as surprised as anyone else that he came back. But it worked out for the Fellowship that he did. So that is my very kind of long-winded answer to Peter's questions. I hope I answered it, Peter, as well as I could, and to your satisfaction. If you've got any comments, any things that you want to say, any counterpoints to what I've just said, feel free, like I said, to email me in at lotramapod@gmail.com. I welcome any questions you have, or clarifications, or anything. I've listened to a lot of podcasts. This is my first time doing one, so this is all the stuff they say at the end of it. So hopefully I get this all right. Subscribe to this so you can get updates on when we get the new episodes whenever they come out. I still got to figure out what my release schedule is going to be. It kind of depends how many questions come in. Feel free to follow us on social media if we have any. Those will probably get up somewhere if people actually listen to this. I don't have a Patreon, but everybody in the podcasting world seems to have a Patreon, so maybe I'll have a Patreon, and it'll help. If I do, it'll help things like getting a real mic, because I'm kind of making do with a cheap fakey one that I found. Yeah, that's sort of how podcasts end, I think. This one has been pretty loose. It might get more formal as we go along, as I figure out how I want these things to go. If you are a listener and you have skill in art, I would love to commission from you, like cover art for this podcast. I don't like AI-generated images. I don't think Tolkien would like AI-generated images. So it would be great if I could have a real artist come up with sort of the, thumbnail for what this podcast's could look like for the cover art. And yeah, artists should be paid for their work. So let me know what you charge, and maybe I can work out a commission. Same thing, I'm going to try to figure out theme music for this. We'll see. I've got maybe some leads on that, but if you are a musician and you also would like to, I'd like to commission some work for you, as well. Figuring out how this whole thing will end, it'll be like a lot of podcasts have a fun catchphrase. I don't know if this one's going to be keep on fellowshipping. Don't like that. We'll figure it out. We'll get there. But thank you for listening to the very first episode of the Lord of the Rings AMA podcast. Have a wonderful week.